Let's say you download Go Ethereum, or just Geth, how it's called. Geth is one of many different blockchain nodes, but they all do essentially the very same thing. You install Geth and you run it. Geth is a command line tool. We will use it quite a lot in this course, but before we use it, you have to understand how it runs on a very basic level. Now, if you run it, two things will happen. Geth tries to find other blockchain nodes and connects to them. This is the first thing. The second thing, Geth will open a JavaScript JSON RPC on your computer to let you interact with the node. For the former, it will start connecting to other nodes and start downloading blocks. So it really replicates the blockchain locally on your computer. The blockchain is then stored on your computer. There is no central server. The download works a bit like torrent. Pieces are downloaded from other nodes in the network. Now, there are also several ways how Geth synchronizes, but essentially either as a full sync, as a fast sync, or as a light sync. If you run it as a full client with a full sync, it will download the block headers plus the block bodies of every block and also reprocesses every single transaction that happened. This takes up a lot of disk space, several dozen gigabytes. Of course, it also needs a lot of bandwidth to download the blocks from other nodes. The fast sync also downloads all the block headers and bodies of every block. But it will only process the last 1024 transactions. Redundancy is what makes sure everything works so securely in the blockchain. If you run Geth as a light client, it will only download the headers, and it will download a snapshot of the current state, which is a very new way of synchronizing. It's less secure but sufficient enough for most applications. This way is not only much faster, but it also takes much less space, probably only a few hundred megabytes, and it synchronizes in minutes rather than maybe days. So, by now you should know what happens automatically in the background when you open Geth the first time. And also why it takes so long until you can really use it maybe. Well, now we have covered the sync, but what about this JavaScript JSON RPC that I was talking about at the beginning? Yes, there is by default a JavaScript JSON RPC which all blockchain nodes offer. It speaks JavaScript. So it's like a command line window where you can type JavaScript commands to interact with the blockchain node and the blockchain itself. Let's draw some parallels. Imagine you are connecting to a MySQL server with a MySQL client. In that MySQL client, you can enter MySQL commands. Now you are interacting with the MySQL server and with the database. You can select or insert or delete or just modify data. Or you can create new users and so on. This is very similar with Geth. In Geth, you can enter commands that look like JavaScript. You can create new accounts, you can send transactions, you can sign transactions, and you can do a whole lot of other things. Now, there are different ways of reaching this JavaScript JSON RPC. One way is via inter-process communication, or IPC. This is a bit too technical, but essentially you are directly communicating with Geth via a file or a pipe. That works great if you are connecting with a Geth client to another Geth instance. But there are also other ways where Geth can open an HTTP RPC. That way you can connect with HTTP, which enables a browser, for example, to interact with Geth. This is where Web3.js comes into play. Web3.js is a very simple JavaScript library in its core. It takes commands and reroutes them via AJAX to an Ethereum node that is open to HTTP RPC. Now let's say you have a website and that website uses Web3.js. And you also have a Geth node running. You want to know the accounts in that Geth node. You type in the command to get the accounts. Web3.js will connect to the blockchain node like Geth via HTTP RPC in the background via AJAX. It will run the command, it will take the return value, and will continue executing the script. just like interacting with any other HTTP API. Just in this case, you are interacted with the blockchain directly. We will do this quite a bit in this course, but the basic principle is always the same. Be it with Truffle, Web3.js, TestRPC, Truffle Developer Console, Remix, Mist, and so on. It's always the same. Even the Ethereum wallet is just a website running Web3, connecting to a blockchain node in one way or another. Now, one more time to remind you, Go Ethereum or Geth is a blockchain node. It will download the blocks or at least the headers, so your database, the blockchain, runs locally. It will give you access to the blockchain via a JavaScript JSON RPC. This is the connection between you and the blockchain.
Cái này nó dùng phần mềm gì nó vẽ?
So in this video, I want to talk about how how blockchain nodes communicate. This video will not be too technical, but should give you a rough idea about the concepts of how all of that plays together. About how you download and install Geth. And I'm here on Windows, that's quite obvious. And the instructions for Mac or Linux are very similar. So first of all, you have to go to the Go Ethereum website here on geth.ethereum.org/downloads. And you can also find this in our course repository as a link to this page. Now, Geth will then try to retrieve the current version number and give you here on the very top the options. Geth 173 in this case for Linux, Geth 173 for macOS, Geth 173 for Windows, and if you want to compile it yourself, then you can also download the sources. As a reminder, Geth does not have any upgrade mechanism implemented, so you have to check from time to time for new versions if you, for example, run into connection issues, but we are going to talk about this later again. Now, down here, you can see that by default, on Windows, there is the installer. On macOS, you obviously want to download a 64-bit archive. Geth 173 is enough, you don't need the tools. And on Linux, you have to choose the right version for your Linux distribution. Now, I'm going to download the 173 installer. I'm gonna save it, and then I'm gonna run it. I install Geth. I don't need the development tools for now. I install Geth in my standard directory, and after a while, it should pop up that it's completed. Now, Geth is a command line tool, so you will not find it in your start menu or on macOS in your start bar or anywhere else. You have to start either a terminal on macOS or Linux, or on Windows, I suggest you are using the PowerShell. Let me start the PowerShell.